All right, so good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the third event of the employability package. This is the third of our 5 panels that you must attend in order to receive those 15 engineering hours. Today we have with us 3 very influential women within the industry, Catrina Cresswell, Rowenna Walker, and Alison Mirams. These ladies were the 2020, 2019, and 2018 NAWIC Businesswoman of the Year recipients. For those who don't know, NAWIC is the National Australian Women in Construction Association. So I'd like to extend a huge congratulations on your achievements. If everyone could turn on their camera, please, to make these ladies feel more welcome, that would be awesome. So a bit of an intro about them. Catrina Cresswell is the General Counsel at Sydney Metro and was recognised for a significant contribution to the New South Wales specific program of projects and future pipeline. With her legal background, she has had oversight on over 1,000 highly complex interdependent project contracts. So welcome, Catrina. Rowenna Walker is the Regional Managing Director for New South Wales and ACT from Oricon, and she has over 20 years of international experience in the engineering industry. She is a well-respected influencer in the infrastructure sector who aims to build a diverse and inclusive industry. So welcome, Rowenna. And lastly, Alison Mirams is the Chief Executive Officer at Roberts Co, and she has more than 20 years of experience within the construction sector. Alison has strong commercial expertise and significant site experience and is passionate about growing the female talent pool through mentoring, speaking, and promoting. So welcome. We'll get straight into the questions. So the first question will just be a little bit of an intro about yourself. And also, what do you believe has been your biggest achievement so far? So we might start off with Catrina. Oh, Catrina, you're on mute.
Sorry, I do that every time. I don't know, I never learn. Apologies. Hi, as you said, thanks, Olivia. Thanks for that introduction. I am Catrina Cresswell. I am the General Counsel at Sydney Metro. I'm not sure if you all know what Sydney Metro is. For those in the Northwest, you probably do, but Sydney Metro is a government agency within the New South Wales government, and we are responsible for the first fully automated railway within Australia. We're currently operating 1 line in the Northwest, which goes out from Chatswood to Tallawong, and we have 3 other railway lines in delivery, one being the extension of the Northwest Railway line from Chatswood through under the harbour to Barangaroo, Martin Place Central and down the Bankstown line. Then we also have in the delivery and planning is Metro West, which will run from Central, you've probably seen a lot of this in the news, out to Westmead and Parramatta when that's delivered in 2030. And we're also in planning and development of and delivery of the Western Sydney Airport line to support the new Bradfield Airport in the west. So that's what Sydney Metro is. I know I'm the General Counsel there. Obviously, I'm a construction lawyer by trade. I started my career, well, I studied law and arts at Sydney Uni, so this is my alma mater. I then got a job in one of the major law firms in the city, one of the big CBD law firms. After several years there, I moved to be an in-house lawyer at Qantas and worked very heavily with the airports departments. I was there for 6 years, and then I moved to take another in-house job at one of the large property developers, after which I had a couple of years off having babies. And then I moved back. Then I took my first government role, which is the role I have now with Sydney Metro, looking after the infrastructure project, which is the biggest infrastructure project in Australia and one of the biggest infrastructure projects in the world. So currently I'm the General Counsel with responsibility for the legal team, the audit team, the probate team, and the fraud and corruption team. And I've been there since 2013. That's a little bit about me. Do you want me to go on to the next question?
Yeah, so what is
straight away? Okay, Olivia, sure. I think my biggest achievement is actually the team that I've currently built in Sydney Metro, because when I started in Sydney Metro in 2013, I was the sole lawyer, and I was the sole lawyer for a few years. And then as you know, the project just amplified and got bigger and bigger, I slowly built up my team from scratch. And now I have 30 a high-performing, highly talented team of lawyers and another 10 to 15 of other audit professionals and fraud and corruption professionals. They're a high-performing team. They're well-respected. We're highly bonded. We have a lot of fun together. And I'm really proud of all of them. And so I think my current team is definitely my biggest achievement. I enjoy going to work every day because I enjoy working with smart people and they're intellectually stimulating. And we have a lot of fun. So it's why I've been in the job so long. So I've been there for like almost 10 years now. And previously I used to move around quite a bit. So yeah, that'd be my, I think, definitely.
Yeah, you've got so much experience. So next we'll get Rowenna to introduce herself.
Thanks, Olivia. So my name is Rowenna Walker. I'm a civil engineer by background, originally from the UK. I started my career as an undergrad, actually, in the transport sector, working for a major contractor in the transport sector on roads. I then went and worked in Asia, in Hong Kong, on the airport railway, which is where I sort of fell into the rail part of the industry, which is where I spent most of my career. I then went back to the UK and tried a number of things in terms of design consultancy, and then I went back into working on major projects in rail. I then went also to when I became chartered, I then decided to work for the client. So of the sort of three legs of the stool of being a consultant and a contractor, I decided to try the client side. And then my now husband was bothering me so much about going to Australia. He wanted to move over to Australia. I said, okay, let's give it a go. And that was in 2003. I have moved back to the UK for a while, and we actually lived in New Zealand and worked there for 3 years as well. But ostensibly, that's why I'm here in Australia. So love the industry here, and I moved mainly to consulting the duration that I've been in Australia. So I work for SKM, which then became Jacobs, and I've been with Oricon now for the last 5 years this week, actually. I've had a number of different roles, from a sort of rail capability role to market roles, and now my current role, which is the managing director. So essentially I'm responsible for 600 plus people, making sure that they're safe and well, which is quite a challenge over the last 2 years. And also make sure that we make our revenue targets, and we run a profitable business, and that we deliver good service to our clients. So yeah, not an easy job, but I've got a, as Catrina said in her introduction, I've got a great team, and it's about the team around me. So that's really my background. I'm also I have an interest in governance. So I also I've been on a couple of boards. I'm currently the Vice President for Consult Australia, and I've been on that board since 2017, and that's a longer term career aspiration for me. So in terms of my greatest achievement, I must admit I kind of was racking my brain on this one, and I asked my husband, because I thought I'd get someone else to make that, and he made a good observation. And I think my reflection of when I was 17, which probably is a bit closer to some of the ages you're at, and I was in the UK in a public school system in south of London, and all I knew is I like maths. I had no family who was in the engineering industry, and had very little role models or advice other than a careers teacher who, equivalent of HSC, sort of said, why don't you try engineering? And I said, well, I don't really understand what engineers do. And I didn't really understand that until about halfway through my first year civil engineering course. So I guess fast forward, I never would have thought at the age of 17, just liking maths, not knowing what engineering is, to be running a major part of civil engineering and civil engineering and broader engineering consultancy group on the other side of the world. I guess that's a pretty good achievement from the age of 17 to the age of now 48, so that's 30 years, and all the steps in between.
Yeah, that's very well done. I think a lot of people, if they were asked why they do engineering, mostly, well, I like maths, so I do engineering. And congrats on your 5 years as well. So we'll go to Alison now.
Hi everyone, Alison Mirams. I'm a builder. I studied quantity surveying at university. I have worked in construction since 1998. I started out working for Multiplex, contracts administrator, contracts manager, commercial manager, director for 8 years, had a year off, had my son, went back to Lend-Lease as the New South Wales and ACT general manager of the building business, which was a massive business. We turned over $2.5 billion. We had 850 people. And then got a call after 3 years to say the Roberts family is going to start it back in construction again after leaving for 10 years. We want you to come and run the company. We're going to give you a blank sheet of paper, create the best construction company you can. And so that's what I've been doing for the past 5 years. In terms of an achievement, we started in 2017. We've just turned over, we will be building $1 billion worth of work this year. In terms of what we've built in 5 years, we've got 140 people. We're 37% female by staff. So that's a pretty amazing achievement. That's an achievement from a career point of view, from building a business. If I knew what I know now 5 years ago when we were starting, I probably would have been curled up in the fetal position crying. But, like all good builders do, we wrote a program and we just chewed off a little bit at a time. From a personal perspective, being in the industry, something I am enormously proud of is in 2009, one of our apprentices had a horrific accident and became a quadriplegic. We had no disabled people in the company at the time. And I said to Jake, when I went and saw him in hospital, I said, mate, don't worry about your injuries. You'll come back to work. Now, he was an apprentice and he clearly couldn't come back as an apprentice. But after a lot of time, we got him back to work. He came back as a contracts administrator. We trained the team in how to deal with catheters, in how to have a quadriplegic in the office. And we brought him back to work. He then went on to talk at the United Nations. He's the most amazing kid, but I was able to give him a chance and give him a new life through what we did as a business. And that's something that's pretty special to have been able to do.
Yeah, that's really incredible. So the next question will be, how has the industry changed since you've started in it? And were there any unique challenges that you faced as a woman in the industry? Maybe start with Rowenna this time.
Thanks, Olivia. Yeah, so I guess going back to when I started, so that was in the early 90s. And I guess the biggest change has been certainly in technology and how we use that. When I started, mobile phones weren't really a thing. We had one standalone PC in the office that if you wanted to use it, you went and sat at the PC. We were using programs such as Quattro Pro and using other sort of very old software, so it was a real paper-based type of work. Obviously, again, safety was probably, on reflection, not as progressive as it is now in terms of the safety culture. And certainly you would never have heard anyone talk about mental health. It was a very still, macho culture. I think, we're still working on that, although that has changed to a significant degree. There were female engineers when I started at work, and I think there's a lot more now. I think there's some things that haven't changed. I think there's some great people, and people are really passionate and hardworking in the industry, and it's still a great industry. I just think it has been improving particularly around culture, safety and technology. So those are the things I think that have, stayed the same, as well as the things that have changed. In terms of the challenges, so look, I have to acknowledge that I'm, got a level of privilege being a white Anglo female. I'm heterosexual and I'm not disabled. I think the example that Alison gave, I wouldn't have seen a disabled or visibly disabled person on site, or even encouraged. That would have been too difficult. My first job, I was in an office up a set of stairs. There was not even a thought of even thinking about facilities for anyone. It was, pretty basic. So, those are, so the challenges I face, I think there are others that would have faced a lot more different challenges. Yes, I did get comments when I was first starting out in the industry of, don't worry, love, when you have kids, you won't come back into the industry, and this is all very nice, but you're not going to last. I like to say I've proved them wrong, as a number of my peers at that time that, did continue in the industry. Clearly still not enough women in the industry. But look, I think a number of us have overcome challenges. There's still challenges for a whole range of people, because they're different from the majority, and it is a male-dominated industry. So the more diversity we have in our industry that understand a diverse group of people, the better.
Yeah, that was a really good reflection. So same question for Catrina now.
Yeah, mine's actually quite similar to Rowenna's. I mean, obviously safety's come a long way in the last 20 years. Now the construction industry is one of the best in terms of safety culture around and in terms of industries. But I think, again, the male-dominated industry, when I first started out, when I was, young or straight out of uni, there was a boys' club, and it was a blokey culture, and it was macho. And I think for the first 15 years of my career, that moved at a glacial pace. It didn't move much at all. I remember, being asked to serve the morning tea when I'm walking into a room to negotiate as a lawyer. I remember walking into a room to negotiate, and the engineer that was with me slapped me on my backside as I walked in, and all that sort of stuff used to happen. And when you're a young person, you often shocked and don't quite know how to handle those things. So I think it also, sometimes that blokey culture can end up being a bit of a bullying culture too, rather than a collaborative culture. And I think all those things are now changing, but only in the last 5 years, in my view. And in particular, really the last 3 years, I've seen a big difference. And I think there's a groundswell now that we've got to ride that momentum and make the changes now, because if it doesn't happen now, it never will. So I think it's finally happening, which is great and heartening, I think. But it wasn't like that in my when I was straight out of uni, like you guys will be soon. I also think flexibility's changed. I mean, even my kids are 10 and 12, and I even 5 or 6 years ago, when I was trying to come back into the workforce, my kids were under 5, or I couldn't find a flexible job. I couldn't find a part-time job, and I was told I had to work till 6, and I don't know how to pick up my kids from childcare at 6. It finishes at 6, so that's completely changed now, and COVID's really helped with that as well. So yeah, I think they were the challenges I found. Being the only woman in the room often was hard. And I didn't know how to handle it, and often I just ignore inappropriate comments. But I am, obviously I don't find that in my current role, probably because I'm older and I'm senior, but it is something I'm keen to keep an eye on for the younger female members of my team. But it's definitely improved a lot, particularly in the last 3 years, which is really good to see.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective, that it's only just starting to make a big change, but we got to keep going. And Alison, same question for you.
So when I started in the industry in 98, we were operating on a computer system called MS-DOS. That's before Windows. We didn't have mobile phones, we didn't have iPads, we didn't have iPods, we didn't have the music, what were the music ones called? USBs were floppy disks. They were 5.25-inch floppy disks. They held like 350 kilobytes of data. In site offices, everything was on A1 plans. Everything was printed. And if there was a drawing revision, we would print hundreds of drawings and put them in pigeonholes for the subbies to come and pick up their new drawings. There was porn in the site offices. There was porn in the lunchrooms. There was porn in the toolboxes. And when I'd walk around on site, they'd open the toolbox as I walked past for me to see the porn. And I'd hear the wolf whistles. And to be clear, they weren't a compliment. They were just pointing out to everyone that there was a girl on site. If the site manager needed a photo taken on site, you took the site camera, you took the photo, and then you took the film to the chemist to get the 1 hour development, so you had photos. To do the head count each day on site, it was a foreman walking around and counting heads. And to be clear, if the workers moved, they got counted twice or 3 times. So it was a very, very different environment. There was no technology, you know, it was the pencil behind the ear. It was a black book on site. It was very antiquated. I didn't have a toilet. I didn't have a toilet on my first site for 18 months. I had to walk around, I had to leave the site office, go around the block past 2 office buildings to get to a toilet. And I remember asking them one day, why did you build a boys' toilet and not a girls' toilet? And they said, oh, we could only build one. I was like, oh, okay. And I accepted it and moved on because I was the only girl. I am now a toilet Nazi. I inspect toilets everywhere to make sure that we have equal toilets for men and women. On our current sites, we have breastfeeding rooms. And yes, mums are not returning to work with their children, but mums might come back to work still expressing breast milk, and you don't prepare your dinner sitting on the toilet. So the girls or ladies shouldn't prepare the baby's food expressing on a toilet. So we have breastfeeding rooms. And in our latest site office, we actually have a prayer room as well. You know, so it's inclusivity for everyone. That didn't exist 20 years ago. Like that just wouldn't have been heard of. My first site, I was told by a foreman, he said, you won't last. And, you know, I stayed at Multiplex for 16 years. Very common when I was in a meeting to ask a question and for the person, and normally it was a man on the other side, to answer to the guy next to me. And I'd ask a question and they'd answer to the guy next to me. Now I was in a position, if when we walked out of that meeting, I'd say to the project manager, he's not getting a job. And he'd be like, why? He was awesome. And I'd be like, he didn't respect me and he didn't talk to me, so I'm not employing him. And very quickly I started to get respect. But that was hard. And really probably only until my last 2 jobs, when I had a big title, did I get respect quickly. Before that, it is always the assumption that you are a little girl. But the industry is changing. We have sadly lost the practical jokes. You know, site offices used to be a lot of fun. We've become a little bit too politically correct. But with more women coming into the industry, the conversations on sites have changed as well, and changed for the better. It's a much more inclusive environment, collaborative environment, less litigious, less aggressive, all those sorts of things.
Yeah, that's really awesome to hear about the inclusivity. So the next section of this talk will be about 2 different issues. The first one is, what are your views on companies mandating a minimum percentage of women on their board or executive teams, or for women going for internships? What are your opinions on mandating this minimum percentage of females? We'll start with Catrina this time.
Well, I'm for both. I think for the reasons that, you know, boards are still mostly dominated by the baby boomer generation, and until we get diversity in at that level, we're not going to be able to counter the subconscious bias that is often just simply there with that generation. I know there's probably more female lawyers than there are engineers, but it's still, you know, until we get enough diversity in all levels of management, you know, it's not going to change. And so I'm all for it. Equally with interns. In fact, I think the target probably should be higher that with interns. In government, and I think government should lead the way, that Premier's priority is to have 40% of women in leadership. You in Sydney Metro, we have, and we publish those targets and how where we're achieving them and where we're not in our annual report. So I think that visibility is very important. But I don't think it's targets alone that will enable a culture of inclusivity. There's many, many factors, the most important one of which is visibility and normalising women in senior leadership. You know, I remember even 3 years ago, we had a new shake-up of our leadership team, and it went from being male-dominated to having 5 out of the 7 as being women, and it was notable. People were talking about it. You know, now it's normal. No one talks about it because it's become normalised. It's not a thing anymore to have more women in the room than men. So that even in that 3-year period, that change has happened. So it's also about, you know, mentoring, career development programs to support and making, you know these non-traditional roles, you know, construction roles in particular, attractive career option for women. And unless they can see it, they won't believe they can do it too. So
yeah. There's definitely so many different options that we can take to increase the women engagement. So we'll move on to Alison now. What are your opinions on the issue?
I am in favour of setting targets. I'm not in favour of mandating numbers. But I think everything you do in life, you have a target. You know, if you want to lose weight, you say, I want to lose 5 kilos or 10 kilos. Everything has targets, and you have to report against your target, to Catrina's point. If you don't report on it, it's pretty useless. We are currently 37% female. We want to get to 40% female by the end of 2022, FY22. So June next year, and we have a plan in how we're doing that. In terms of interns, I actually think companies have cracked interns. I think companies have cracked grad recruitments. There are not many companies these days that I see that don't say, I have 50-50. Where we suffer is when you get women into the childbearing years, and then in senior management, to Catrina's point, you've got baby boomers sitting at the top, and they'll say to you, I've got the best person for the job. I say, get the best person for the job in the female gene pool. And if in the female gene pool you can't find one, then you can go to the male gene pool, but you have to look in the female gene pool first. There are incredibly talented women out there. They're just quiet. And if you only recruit from the CVs you receive, you won't find great women. You've really got to hunt for them because they are there. So I actually think, and I think yesterday was Equal Pay Day. And in the construction industry, our gender pay gap's gone up. But the more we recruit at a low level and the more women we get at a low level, the greater the pay gap will be, because the pay gap is calculated on the average man's salary to the average woman's salary. And so if we put more women in at a low level, the average woman's salary comes down. So we actually need to get more women into senior management to fix that pay gap. And the pay gap is a bit of a silly analysis, because so long as we're doing like for like in equal roles, that's the right answer. More women into senior positions will fix it. So I actually think companies need to be focused on getting women into senior positions more than interns, because I think we've cracked interns. I think interns and grad are really, really well looked after.
Yeah, I like that. How you mentioned having a target instead of a minimum. So what are your thoughts, Rowenna?
I agree with Alison. I think, look, setting targets is the right thing. I mean, philosophically, I think whether in private or public sector, our boards and our executive committees need to reflect our workforce and our customers. And if they don't, then they're not going to be making the best decisions on behalf of their customers and their workforce. And they're not going to be representative. They're going to be representative of what they represent. And if that's not diverse, whether that be gender, cultural background, or sexual orientation, then they're not going to have that cross section. So I think that's a philosophical aspiration that I think, you know, should be around that. As Alison said, the issue is our ability to get people into those roles. And there's a whole heap of reasons why we aren't there yet. And certainly, whilst the aspiration has been to get more women's roles, it hasn't happened fast enough. There is the talent out there. We can guarantee you that. The issue is that targets accelerate, shine a light, and then, as Catrina and Alison say, they hold people to account and make them look harder at the talent, and rather than go for the easy option of, oh, it looks like me, and they don't spend the time to really look in the places that they haven't been looking. So that's the challenge, and that's what targets do. They make people look harder.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, because I think from an undergraduate perspective, targets would be better instead of minimum, just because, like, I want to be accepted for a role because of I'm a good engineer instead of I'm a female. So there needs to be a bit of a balance, I think. And yeah, targets would definitely be the way to go. So
can I just add on the merit point, Olivia?
Yeah.
Because I think I had a view that if I'm good enough, I will be picked. Unfortunately, because of bias, that isn't always the case.
Yeah.
And merit is very subjective. And, one sort of observation I'd have is if we had as many mediocre women as we have mediocre men in our industry, that's when we have equality. And, I guess that's really my view of how people use merit as an excuse.
Yeah. Well, possibly.
Can I add to that, Olivia, as well? When I was at Lendlease, the organisation was 32% female if you sliced it from top to bottom. And Steve McCann, the CEO, to his credit, mandated that at every event there had to be 32% female representation as a minimum. So, and it had to be at all levels in the organisation. So I got invited to everything. And my fellow GMs would say to me, you're only invited because you're a chick. And I'd say, yeah, maybe, but I'm there. I'm networking, I'm hearing the message firsthand, and you're not. So you don't ever question why you get offered something, you say yes. The company won't set you up to fail, and they won't set you up in a position where you can destroy the organisation. So it doesn't matter if you're offered something because you're a female, you take it and you say yes and you run with it. And I can tell you, a man has never, ever said to me, you only offered me that because I'm a man and I'm saying no, but plenty of women have. So please don't ever say no.
Yeah, of course. So the second issue, which sort of relates to that, what role should men have in encouraging equality in the workplace? We'll start with Alison.
Look, men have a really important role, and that's to call out bad behaviour. And that's bad behaviour by men and women. And make no mistake, women can be nasty to other women, and women need to pull other women up. But I think a lot of what I see is sometimes there are men in the workplace who they'll say something, they don't mean anything by it, but they don't realise how offensive it is. And sometimes you've got to say, hey, do you realise when you said that it sounded like this? Because the standard you walk past is the standard you accept. So there are men who are in positions who can do that. There are also men in positions where they're recruiting. My head of operations, Stephen Surgeon, he's a civil engineer. He is the most amazing supporter of equality. And he will go and find women, because there are certain roles where we can get more women, like design managers, engineers. We can't find them in foreman roles, in supervisor roles. There's just not many in the industry. So Steve will go out of his way to really hunt for women in those roles where he knows he's going to get them, so that he can balance the equality in the organisation. And men need to be looking out to make sure that you're not just recruiting mini-me. Make sure you're recruiting a diverse team and you've got all forms of diversity so that you get the best thinkers. I think Rowenna said it earlier, that we need to have teams that reflect society and the people we're building projects for. So men are absolutely, and they're in the senior positions. They're in the senior positions to mentor women, to sponsor women, to pull them up, to make sure that they get a seat at the table. And when you're in that room, make sure the quiet people in the room get to talk. Because women don't always put their hand up and talk. So your job is to make sure everyone gets a voice.
Yeah, for sure. What are your thoughts, Catrina?
No, I agree. Men's involvement is actually key. It's a joint problem, and there's lots of stats showing. It's a smart thing for any leader or CEO to do anyway, because there's lots of stats showing that the diversity of views reaps rewards in results. So offering different perspectives avoids groupthink, and you often get to a better result. So just ignoring the morals or ethics of it, it's a good thing to do to get good results. But as Rowenna said, men are still by and large the people in power. So without their backing, it's not going to change. That's why the sort of programs like Male Champions of Change is really important. And secondly, importantly, change needs to be inclusive of everybody, including men. So we don't want to alienate men, and it needs to be inclusive of all minority groups. And for a better culture and better engagement, that's what we aim to. That should be the aim. And I think it's a good point that Rowenna made too, because one thing I have noticed is the blatant sort of things that I talked about from when I was a younger lawyer are changing, but now the way these sorts of issues play out tends to be more in women. In the diversity of style needs to be considered, because you might have a more timid person or a more shy person, and that it is important to make sure their voice is heard. And I often found now more the forms of sexism I see is when the women are talked over or ignored or not included in a meeting, or just where the man in the suit's advice is taken more seriously than the woman's advice. So they're the more subtle forms of what we're seeing now, and it is important for that men and women and everyone calls it out.
Yeah, definitely. It's everyone's role to help. Rowenna, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was going to say. It's everyone's role to promote gender diversity and diversity in the broadest sense, and it's even more so on men to be champions of gender diversity, female gender diversity, because otherwise it becomes a female issue, and people go, it's the females that need to sort this problem out. We're just standing here, we're okay. So to be a visible advocate, and also to understand people's lived experiences and have empathy and vocalize that, and be the upstander rather than the bystander. So it's not just the female calling out the behavior, it's the male. And in those situations, particularly as Alison says, when particularly if the male has a power advantage, we often in business at the moment they do. And it really has a greater impact. So, and their ability to sponsor and mentor others of a more diverse background, and then their behaviour in how they include people, whether that be, as Alison said, in a meeting environment, and create that culture where people do feel included.
Yeah, there's some great perspectives. So there'll be two last questions quickly. There's a bit of a future question. So where do you see the industry heading in terms of women's involvement? And as a follow-up, what do you personally wish to achieve? So we'll start off with Alison.
Women's involvement, ultimately we need to get to 50-50. We are the third largest industry in the country, and we currently have, I think, somewhere between 12 and 18%, depending on which stats you believe, and only 2% of trades are women. So we need to get many more women into the industry. In terms of what do I personally wish to achieve, if you read all the stuff we've posted on LinkedIn or follow my personal page, we are really trying to change the industry to be 5 days a week. The industry has some amazing statistics that we should be really proud of. We're the third largest industry. We produce about 9% of GDP, but we have very high presenteeism, we have very high divorce rates, we have very high suicide rates. A construction worker is 6 times more likely to die from suicide than a workplace accident. That is not sustainable. And so we have been trialling building 5 days a week at Concord Hospital and Liverpool Hospital. The University of New South Wales has studied it, and the final report will come out in October. But it is a resounding success. And most of the workers, by far and away, the workers want to work 5 days a week. The impact has been not a loss of productivity, but we've got a happier, healthier, less depressed, more rested workforce. We've got better quality, better safety. But what really was the kicker for me in it, is the feedback from the next of kin was that the 6-day working week perpetuates the gender stereotype that dad is the breadwinner and mum is the carer. Because dad's hours are long and inconsistent, mum has to do all the caring responsibilities, and women have left their full-time employment, all their work, to look after the kids. One of the partners said, if my husband left me, I'd have nothing. I haven't worked, I've got no superannuation. And we know that women over 50 are the largest group of homeless people in Australia. So our working patterns are stopping women from coming into the industry. It's stopping us from retaining women in the industry, but it's also stopping women from working in society. And so we have to change. Now, pre all of you being born, in the late 80s, we were a 5-day-a-week industry. Interest rates in the early 90s went to 17%. The cost of time was enormous, and builders added the 6th day to save time. The cost of time is nothing now. And so we really need to recalibrate and give people back their life. And, you know, my view is that all of you on this call don't want to work Saturdays when you're the age that you are. You don't care that I did 80 hours a week as a cadet. You want to have a life and you want to have a career. So companies will change when you are sitting in my seat. Why wait 15 years for you to get there? Why not do it now for us to enjoy it as well? And so we are really pushing for 5-day-week projects. We now have 4 projects 5 days a week. And other contractors are starting to tender 5 days a week. So that is my absolute desire. And I will push that until the day I leave the industry to try and get us to change so that it is a sustainable industry, not just for all of us, but for the generations that will follow in our footsteps.
Yeah, well, 5 days a week certainly sounds great. You've got my vote. And the reasoning behind it, I think, is really cool. So Rowenna, your thoughts?
Yeah, look, like Alison, my aspiration is to increase that female participation in the industry, and to see that reflected across the different levels. So, like, you know, we've done a good job to get in those grad levels and in that early career, but to see that reflected further up would be a real aspiration. And I think it's the impact of having that more diverse representation in our industry, I think, will in turn solve a number of problems and make it even more exciting an industry than it is now. It's a great industry to be in, but I think having more diverse group of leaders and participants in the industry would definitely make it more welcoming, bring a more happy, fun environment, and just, I think, be more prosperous. Certainly we've seen that having a percentage females in boards and management position does in turn impact profit, so that will benefit our industry greatly. So that's my hope. We've still got a lot of work to do to get there, and certainly I'd like to see a number of people on this call enter our industry, and that's sort of from a personal perspective, is what I can do as a role model. I'm an okay engineer. I'm not going to be providing any great technical innovations as an individual, but what can I do as a leader? I can be a role model. I can impact and influence people. And if me being on this panel, or being a leader of a broader group of people, if that has a legacy in bringing a more diverse workforce and making people feel more comfortable and they want to continue in the industry, that's really a personal outcome that I hope I can achieve.
Yeah, that's really cool. Well, you've definitely inspired me, and so have the other 2 ladies. Hopefully people at the event today have also been inspired. And then lastly, Catrina, what are your thoughts on it?
Look, I think it's similar to what the other ladies have talked about. We've got to get women's involvement improving quicker. It's been too slow to date. It shouldn't be notable when there's equal numbers of women in the room. And it is about getting them into senior positions to normalise it and make it visible. I also think, the policies and procedures are important, because I think men should have equal flexibility and parental leave as women do, because we shouldn't presuppose that the woman's the secondary breadwinner. I mean, often the woman is the male is the main breadwinner, and why shouldn't it helps that person, the woman, therefore, if the husband's able to stay home and get paid. So it's about flexibility for everybody. I think that helps women as well. I think COVID has helped with things like working from home immensely. Like, we're all working from our home, my whole team at the moment. And I think that's been a step change for flexibility that probably, has helped bring everybody 5 to 10 years ahead in 1 year's time. I mean, I remember when we were talking about how can we all work from home on Teams? What is this Teams you are talking of? And now it's just the norm now, and we'll never go back to full-time working in the office. And that's enormously helpful for women, particularly when they're in their baby making and young children years. And that's come such a long way in the last 2 years. It's totally different to what it was when I had my babies 10 and 12 years ago. So I think that's going to be enormously helpful in enabling women to keep their careers up. And the one thing I do try and do is, with my young women who are in the baby making age, I often say there's a promotion coming up. I'll ring them on maternity leave and ask them to apply. And they go, I'm not sure I can do it right now because I know I want a big job while I'm, got young kids. And that's obviously their prerogative. But what I do try and do is put in support and resources around them to enable them to apply for that job and do it on a part-time basis, so they don't miss out on career opportunities, so they get up the ladder quicker than I did. I mean, it took me a long time to get up the ladder. It should be a lot quicker for the young women in my team. And I'm trying to pay that way and help them do that. And for me, it's about personally making it a better workplace for my 12-year-old daughter and my 10-year-old son to inherit when they hit the workforce in 10 years' time.
Yeah, that's really cool. Thank you all for your perspectives. I'll hand over to Sangeetha now, and she'll start the Q&A.
Thanks, Liv. So for one of the first questions, what advice would you give to females that are entering the industry? So maybe Rowenna, could you answer that question?
So I'd give probably the same advice to females as I would to males, in that it's a great industry to start with. One thing that I'm always keen, because I've benefited from that, is when you're given an opportunity, I think, as Alison said, grab it, say yes, and think later. Because often that opportunity may not come again. So get as broad an experience as you can. Every experience is a good experience. You might feel like you're in the most boring role or it feels mundane, but you're learning, because you'll look back on that and you would have you would get something out of that. So every experience is a good experience. So that would be my first piece of advice. The other one is around developing your own style. Don't think that engineers have to be a certain type of person or behave in a particular type of way. You are you. Be you. That's okay. Everyone wants. That's what we're striving for, to have broader representation of different people with different styles. The other thing is to be clear on your goals. Tell people what you want, understand why you want them, understand your own personal why. Be clear on your goals, they will change, and tell people about them, because they're not, people can't help act on your goals on your behalf, particularly your line managers or sponsors or mentors, unless you tell them. So those would be the first few things.
Yeah, those are some great takeaways, especially acting on your targets. So I think I'll hand it over to Alison.
I'm not sure I can add to that. It was really good. It was great advice.
That's all good. So does Catrina have anything to add?
I think the main things I'd say is back yourself, trust your gut. I've always found that your gut's really wrong. And when I haven't trusted my gut, it's when things haven't gone right for me. If in doubt, call it. So if you're, I think to help you with that, having an armory of lines at your disposal for those times where things might happen which you're not sure are right and you're a bit shocked by. Because I think when I was young, sometimes I was so shocked I just said nothing. Things like saying, if you're not sure if someone's saying something that's out of line or not aligned with values, just asking them to repeat it. And often that will, if they've said something inadvertently, that'll shine a light on what they've done, or it helps. It's something that we just need to call out. Just make sure you've got the confidence to call things out. The other thing is, let other people do their own thinking and feeling. You don't need to do it for them. Don't worry about what other people are thinking. Don't worry about other people thinking you're only getting the job because you're a woman. Because most people aren't thinking about you anyway, they're thinking about themselves. And just feel entitled to ask questions and be inquisitive, because people do like sharing information. And, don't be scared, people are just people. So, yeah, that's up to add to what Rowenna said, that's the only other thing I'd say.
Yeah, going off of that, my next question is, women in leadership often struggle with being assertive. What are some ways you've overcome this, and what tips would you give for younger women who are just starting out? So maybe Alison could answer the question.
I think I think it's in how you deliver and what in how you say it. I think Rowenna said it earlier. Be you. Don't be something you're not, and don't think a leader needs to thump a table or yell or scream or behave in a certain way. You do leadership in your own style. I have always found that I ask a very direct question. Now, that's a good thing and it's a bad thing. But I always say please and thank you. I am always putting up, if my team come up with an idea, I will say, Fred came up with this, or Claire came up with this. I don't sell it as my own advice. And I think you don't need to be dogmatic. You can get your point across in a really polite fashion, in a quiet, well-articulated fashion, without being really in your face assertive. And I think it's when women try and be really in your face and loud and like a really strong man can be, that they get into trouble. So I would say there's a lot of merit. I am very quietly spoken in a meeting, but they're under no pretenses as to what I want. So I think it's just in how you ask the question and how you frame it. And so long as you act with decency every time, you will get your point across appropriately. So you've just got to, be conscious of how you ask the question.
Yeah, those are some great points, being articulate and getting your point across. So does Catrina have anything to add?
No, I think that they're very good points, just being measured. And also when you are a bit stumped, having that armory of lines at your disposal, think of things to say to keep the conversation going on in the right direction.
Yeah. Rowenna, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think they're all good points. I think reflect on some of the situations, and I reflect because I'm an extrovert, and so I have the tendency to speak what I'm thinking but some of the introverts, which may be accused of being quiet, will come in at a later stage and say something so poignant, but measured and well articulated, that have huge impact. So that just shows that you don't have to be the one speaking first, speaking loudly. Time and think about what you're about to say and what you want to say and why, and have impact.
Yeah, definitely. Everyone has different leadership styles. So there was a question in the chat asking, what do you think is the greatest social factor which dissuades women from choosing a career in engineering? So Alison, do you want to answer this question?
Two factors, I would say. My son is 8. When he was in kindy, he brought home a reader, and it said, "Mummy's a nurse, daddy's a doctor, mummy's a teacher, daddy's a builder." And I said to him, "That's wrong, read it properly." And he said, "Mummy's a builder." And I said, "Yes." So at the age of 5, he was reading gender stereotyped material. At a very young age, we're told boys do this and girls do that. The second factor is parents. we had, when we were building Mount Street in North Sydney, we had Willoughby Girls High came to site, as did Sydney Girls High. And at the time, the crane was right outside our site office at the same height. And one of the girls said, oh, I'd love to be a crane driver. And I said to the team after they left, I said, that'll die when she gets home and tells mum, I want to be a crane driver. And mum says, no, you don't, darling. You want to be a lawyer or an accountant, or, you know, you don't want to be a crane driver. So parents have they know what they want their children to be, and they will push them in that path. So we've got to get to kids early. There's a really great book, and I think actually I got it from Rowenna's LinkedIn page. I want to be an engineer, from an engineer in Melbourne, wrote it. And it's fantastic because it says mummy builds bridges, daddy builds dams, mummy builds tunnels under the harbour, daddy builds roads. And it's mum and dad all the way through the book. And it's designed for 5 to 8 year olds. I've bought heaps of copies, sent it to my son's school, sent it to other schools who've attended, to get that conversation early. So we've got to get to kids young, and we've got to get parents to understand, you know, a career in building is not the guy you see on the side of the road with his bum hanging out of his pants. It's a very sophisticated professional engineer now. And in that industry, you can be a lawyer, a finance person, a designer, an engineer, a builder. Like, there are so many opportunities in that umbrella. But it's quite often a conversation at home that kills the idea.
Yeah, definitely. It all lies in the younger generation. So Rowenna, do you have anything to add?
I appreciate we haven't got time. No, I agree. I think that my parents didn't have a clue. They were pretty useless, quite honestly, in terms of my career choices. Clearly, they were very supportive, but they didn't have the knowledge. They didn't know. So having teachers that are informed, parents that are informed, and that society is critical, particularly in those younger years. As Alison said, you know, I've got 2 boys, and yeah, it's really interesting to see some of the things that they get exposed to.
Yep. So Catrina, anything you'd like to add?
Oh, I agree. It's stereotypes, and it's about getting into the schools. We do a lot of school STEM programs specifically targeted at women, and it's getting it at primary school. I think that's the key.
Yep. So last question, since we're running out of time, very quickly. Lauren said in the chat, how do you stay motivated to keep pursuing equality and increased well-being within the engineering field, especially because at times it seems like it could be very hard to push against these stereotypes and ingrained biases? Rowenna, do you have anything to say?
Okay, I had a mother who in the 1960s was striving for gender equality. So I came from a background where it was something that was the right thing to do, and I still believe it's the right thing to do. So that's what drives me.
Yeah. So Alison, do you have anything to add?
I think when you get into senior positions, you've got to make the most of your position. You know, you're in a position to drive change, and if you don't, who is going to do it? So it's the right thing to do, and you're in a position to make it happen. So you need to do it. And when I'm having a bad day, and I do have bad days, there are times when I get my legs cut off, I go out to site and I see the smiles on the faces of our staff, and I think, yep, we're on a good thing here, keep going. And that's the adrenaline injection I need to keep me going for another few months. So it's worth it. It's really rewarding when you can do it as well.
Yeah. So Catrina, do you have anything? Do you agree?
My motivation's my 12-year-old daughter, and also my 10-year-old son, and also my team. I want to, you know, I want to make it easier for them. And you're right, it's an obligation when you get to a certain level to make the path behind you easier, because I didn't have a lot of people making the path ahead of me easier. Than in some ways, some of the baby boomer generation like to pull up the ladder. But I want to lay the ladder down and help people get up and reach down and pull them up.
Yeah, definitely. It's an important cause. So I'll hand it over to Liv now to conclude the event.
Thanks, Sangeetha. Yeah, so this is the conclusion of the event. Just a reminder, the I Build Our Future mentoring program applications close 9 p.m. tonight. The next panel for this package is September 8th, 5 to 6 p.m. We'll just do like a quick screenshot photo time. So if everyone can turn on their camera and show your teeth, please, that would be great. All right, perfect. Thank you so much to Catrina, Rowenna, and Alison. It's been great having you. Hopefully the audience has enjoyed and has been inspired. You guys have had some really good answers. And yeah, this concludes the event. So thank you, everyone, and hope you have a good night. Bye.